Hello, party people, and welcome to Iceland. I should actually show you outside. So I'm outside of Husavik, Iceland. This was the area that was featured in the Netflix Will Ferrell movie, Eurovision, Saga of Fire and Ice. It's a beautiful little town up in the north coast of Iceland. Great for getting away from everybody because I like to get away from people when I'm on vacation from time to time. I'm waiting for the hot tub to fill up, so I thought I'd answer your questions. Hot tubs in Iceland are kind of interesting. Because of the volcanoes and the glaciers, they effectively have limitless hot water coming up through geothermal hot springs, and yeah, it's nice clean water too as well. Um, so it's kind of weird how they deal with hot tubs. Whenever you want to use your hot tub, you just open up the faucet and hot water goes in. And whenever you're done, you empty it back out again. So it's kind of like a bathtub in that sense, which is nicer because you don't have to deal with so much pH balancing, chemicals, and all that kind of thing. It's really pleasant, and it's crazy hot too as well. We can't even take it straight out of the ground here. We have to like mix in some glacier water with it because the hot tubs here are so hot. So let's go through your top voted questions from PollGab. The top voted question is from 1440 by 1080, who asks, I have an always on availability group with two nodes. I've optimized both nodes to a point where the primary can withstand all of the reads. I want to download licensing from enterprise to standard. What's the process to switch from always on availability groups to basic availability groups? So the first thing that you want to ask yourself is why are you doing that? Because you won't get a refund on licensing. Microsoft won't just give you the money back. But assuming that you're trying to true up for some point from years from now, or if you were never licensed for enterprise agreement to begin or enterprise edition to begin with, which I've worked with on customers with that, then what you want to do is you want to reinstall SQL Server with standard edition, which alone takes downtime in order to do. You can do upgrades, SKU upgrades. I don't believe you can go from enterprise to standard, but I could be totally wrong about that. The term you're looking for is called a SKU, SKU, a SKU upgrade. Google to see whether or not it supports, and it's probably even documented on BrentOzar.com. It's just been so long since I've had to do it, to see if you can do an upgrade from enterprise to standard. Then at the same time you're doing that, or before you do that, you want to make sure that your availability group setup is only one database per AG. In standard edition, each database requires its own basic availability group. So if you do that ahead of time, if you set up your databases so it's one database per AG, and then you do the SKU upgrade, that might just work in and of itself. You may not have to do any other changes. I've never done anything else. So here's what I would probably do if I was trying to aim for it in production. Go build yourself another set of SQL servers. You could do it pretty quick and easy with Enterprise Edition. Simulate the setup that you're aiming for, and then see what happens when you drop down to standard. Because you may have to even recreate the availability group. I have absolutely no idea. If you do get into the position where you have to recreate the availability group, don't play around with listeners. I mean, you can use listeners, but instead what you want to do is a DNS CNAME that points to the listener. Go set up a DNS CNAME that points to the listener name, and then have your clients, all your end users, point to that DNS CNAME instead. Next up, Compat Level 140 asks, soon after I do update stats, auto update stats, I get single row estimates for date ranges starting from yesterday. Oh, yes. It says, I thought the modern cardinality estimator was supposed to prevent this major error. What do I need to study? You need to study something called the ascending key problem. Ascending key problem. And there are two trace flags that you have to enable. I don't remember what they are off the top of my head. I have them in my mastering query tuning class or my mastering server tuning class. I can't quite remember. But it's the ascending key problem. There are two trace flags you have to turn on, and then you have to do 3 statistics updates in a row with SQL Server noticing each time that your keys are ascending, and then it kicks on the ascending key stuff. But that's something that requires a whole lot of work there, those two trace flags. Next up, Chase asks, when would having tempdb with only one file be favorable, even if you have more than one CPU? A vendor reports that they're importing faster with temp tables using when they only have one MDF, which makes no sense. My guess is that it involves the execution plans are different between one MDF and multiple MDFs. My guess is that there's a sort that's involved when the query goes parallel. I am just guessing here though. What you want to do is you want to compare the two execution plans, one with multiple MDFs and one with a single MDF, to see if they're different. If they are different, then ways that you might fix that if you have multiple MDFs is, I'm just guessing. I would need to see the plans to know for sure. But a reasonable guess would be one of these might have parallelism and one might not. Now you can get parallelism even if you only have one MDF file, but I'm guessing that something that the vendor's doing is causing a difference, like that they're testing with one CPU versus multiple CPUs. If that's what the difference is between the two query plans, then what you could do to fix it is say option max.1 on your system with multiple MDF files, and then you'll be able to do it. You'll be able to match the vendor's query plan. Generally speaking, anytime somebody tells you that another setting or tweak makes things go faster, compare the two execution plans, because very often they're going to be different, and that's what the real root cause is. Next up, Manolis says, do you foresee a specific database technology exploding in popularity due to close alignment with AI? I have no idea what you're even asking. I'm kind of surprised that that is even highly upvoted. I have no clue what you're asking. So sorry, I can't even pretend to guess. MySpecialHoneyPot asks, hi, in various cases, SQL Server chooses to use the clustered column store index where a suitable non-clustered index should deliver better performance. Beside index hints, is there a way to push Query Optimizer not to use the clustered indexes, specifically the clustered column store indexes? It sounds like you're using clustered column store when you shouldn't, like if you're doing select star, which means it sounds like you want to check out my fundamentals of column store class. Look, I know you think you're really smart and you don't think you ever need training, but the reality is I do these training classes because they really help you understand. If you find yourself hinting SQL Server not to use clustered column store, then what in the hell do you have clustered column store for? Get rid of it. And you probably don't need it for the reasons that I explain in that fundamentals of column store class. Go check that out. It's really affordable. It's less than 1 hour of your time. Go dig into it. That's the reason why I build these classes. Green Tissue asks, what breaks when databases are owned by Windows users? I don't remember any of that off the top of my head. My contract actually prohibits security work. I don't want to do it. I find it boring. I find it full of liability and disaster. So pro tip to you, not to you, Green Tissue, but to any of you out there who don't like doing something, stop doing it. It's easy for the guy to say who's a consultant, right? But the faster in your career that you stop doing the things that you don't like, you won't be known for doing them well. You won't be known for having whenever we have a security problem, we go to this person. They have a great reputation. No, stop doing the stuff that you don't like. Now, granted, Green Tissue, that doesn't help you at all, but I can't really help you at all because I don't do security work. See what I did there. Next up, JerseyDBA says, I was looking through SP Blitz results on a server, and I found that all the databases have a legacy target recovery time set incorrectly. Auto checkpointing isn't causing issues. Is there any harm in leaving this and only flipping it to 60 seconds if I start seeing IO issues? You know, there's a SP Blitz, when you're looking through the results, it has a column that's labeled URL. And for those of you who aren't familiar with internet browser technology, URL stands for you read loser. So copy paste that into your web browser. You may have heard of something like that. Copy it into your web browser and read it, winner, because there's information in there about what you should do in order to head off problems. Now, you could say that you could just leave settings the way that they are, even when they're known to cause problems. You could say, well, I don't need to eat right because I've never had a heart attack. I'll wait to have a heart attack until I eat, or I'll wait to eat right until I have a heart attack. Let me know how that works out for you, or rather, don't. Gin and tonic. Next up, Austin Powers asks, my big server's CPU never hits 70%, but I see a lot of parallelism waits. Will adding more cores help? No. SQL Server's already waiting on parallelism. Adding more cores isn't going to make things faster. SQL Server isn't balancing the work appropriately across multiple cores. To learn how that works, check out my Mastering Server Tuning class. You can't fix parallelism weights simply by changing parallelism settings. You have to dig into the queries themselves and the indexes to have SQL Server better parallelize that work across multiple cores. You'll read a lot of bad advice out there on the internet that says, to fix parallelism weights, all you have to do is set maxed op to 1 or raise cost threshold higher. But all that's really doing is turning off parallelism. Your queries won't go faster in 99.9% of cases. Your users will in fact be more pissed off. I don't want your users to be pissed off. Go attend my Mastering Server Tuning class and I'll teach you how that works. Next up, James asks, hi Brent, in your opinion, which I certainly have a lot of, would creating triggers to enforce cross-database referential integrity be something that you would consider and not fall in the generic realm of bad practice? So let's zoom out really big. I don't have a problem with triggers. I don't have a problem with database integrities, but let's zoom out really, really big. Why do you want the database to be the thing enforcing that the code is correct? Because I don't trust the programmers. They're not very bright. Fix that. Get your programmers, get your developers off to training so that they produce better code. If you can't do that, I understand why you would want to have the database reinforce all kinds of rules for you. People should be on time. They should eat their vegetables. But the database isn't necessarily the most cost-effective place to do that. Now, if somebody put a gun to my head and said, you have to enforce cross-database relational integrity inside the database layer because we can't trust our developers to do it, then yeah, sure, triggers is the only way to do that, unfortunately. But what you're seeing there is that the more you try to do stupid stuff, the less support there is built into the database for you. There's no feature built into the database to support cross-database relational integrity because you shouldn't be doing that inside the database. If things need to have relational integrity between them, put them in the same database or get your developers to start coordinating that instead of making the database do that. But it would be my first sign that my developers need training so that we can go through and write the code correctly the first time. Chris asks, do we know what Azure Managed Instances is using under the hood for high availability and disaster recovery? Yeah, kind of. You can see it in the DMVs, in the dynamic management views, dynastic management views. This, ladies and gentlemen, is gin and tonic. It is not water, as you might think by my excellent quality answers. But you can see that it's a flavor of always-on availability groups by looking at the DMVs. So there you go. But it is a flavor of it that's not entirely just always on availability groups. Because, for example, it automatically sets up databases, it automatically tears them down. They can have different names. You see all kinds of neat things when you start spelunking through the DMVs. There's wild stuff in there. Next up, ChompingBits says, what are your thoughts on how to work with vendors that don't follow best practices? Our environment is mostly SQL instances for vendor software we buy. We run SP Blitz weekly and we see lots of configuration warnings. How do you tell a vendor they don't know what they're doing? You don't. Whatever settings a vendor wants to use, let them. You will never be considered a hero in your career for correcting vendors. Vendors will always find the way to pin the blame on you instead of them. So if they want to do something really stupid, go with God. By all means, knock yourself out. When the users come to you expressing a problem, you can, if the root cause is something that the vendor is doing incorrectly, you can say, I think based on my research, that's because of this thing that the vendor is doing. You're welcome to take this to them, but it's not, part of my pay grade. Because that's always going to be a losing battle. When the vendor wants your help, they will come to you, but otherwise don't try and pin blame there. It's just not very effective. Vendors usually don't have full-time SQL Server people or any kind of database people. They don't have full-time database administrators. They're often not running large instances of their own software in their environment, so they don't know how some of the performance settings, for example, come into play. Is what it is. AzureNewb asks, do most of your clients use Azure Managed Instances or Azure SQL? Neither. It is extremely rare in any given year that I get clients using Azure Managed Instances or Azure SQL. So, and it's not because those platforms aren't popular. It's because the people who use those platforms usually have relationships with Microsoft. Microsoft desperately wants those platforms to succeed. So Microsoft will give their customers free consulting time from consulting companies who specialize in those. I don't do that business. I don't want it because the billable rate on that is terrible. The billable rate on that is very low. Now, in exchange, you get a continuous feed of customers from Microsoft without you having to do anything. Microsoft just hands you one customer after another and goes, here you go, for $150 an hour, troubleshoot why Jim Bob's rifle shop can't get replication to work. So if you're down with doing whatever it is for low amounts of money, then that kind of thing is great, I suppose. Doesn't sound very good, does it? Doesn't to me either. So as a result, I only get clients who are willing to actually pay US dollars for the consulting services that they want, and they tend to use other platforms, whether it's SQL Server or Amazon are my most two commonly used clients. So there you go. Next up, Contineo says, not all RDS instances support, or instance types support putting tempdb on local storage. How would you choose between these two instance types? The first thing that I would do is I would go attend my SQL Server in the Cloud class, and I talk about the differences between the different instance types. The second thing that I always ask, and this will be so familiar to everybody on the channel, what's the problem that you're trying to solve? What's the performance issue on the database instance that you're running today that you're moving into the cloud or that you're changing instance types on? If it has a tempdb problem, then you're going to need to use an instance that supports tempdb on local SSD. If it doesn't use tempdb at all, then why bother dealing with those instance types if you can get a better deal on a different instance type? But otherwise, it's kind of like asking, well, what's the perfect car? There is no one perfect car. That's why there are lots of different makes and models so that you can choose the one that you need. I don't have kids. I don't need a 3-row SUV. I would never in my life buy a 3-row SUV, but I understand that other people want to have kids around who put gummy fingers and Dorito-laden dust all over their cars. So they buy 3-row SUVs so they can cram in lots of these little gremlins. Good luck with that. I like kids, but from afar. From a real far. Next up, SGU asks, do I know that missing indexes are not 100% reliable, but is there a way to determine what query caused the missing index recommendation to be made? Yes! Starting with SQL Server 2019, there's a DMV for that. There's a diagnostic view that you can actually query, and we have it built into SP Blitz Index, which is amazing. When you're looking at SP Blitz Index, next to each missing index recommendation, it'll show you a sample query that triggered that missing index recommendation. So check out my totally free How to Use the First Responder Kit class to see how to use that feature, and then make sure you're on SQL Server 2019 or newer, which is just awesome. That was one of my favorite features. And then we'll do one more. Let's see. Depthcharge. Depthcharge says, hi Brent, I've been trying to reduce page I/O latch weights on a 25 terabyte database. A monitoring tool identified 25 terabytes an hour of logical reads from a command, worth investigating, or should I focus on individual queries? Whenever you're trying to reduce page I/O latch weights, what you want to do is focus on what are the queries doing the most reads overall. SP Blitz Index will show you, SP Blitz Cache with sort order reads will do that for you. And I teach you all about this in my totally free How I Use the First Responder Kit class. Whatever's at the top of that chart, that's what you want to focus on for reducing the number of reads, wherever they come from. Doesn't matter if it's your friend Bob, doesn't matter if it's a reporting tool, doesn't matter if it's a background task. Focus on reducing the queries that are doing the most logical reads. Because even if they're reading data that's just cached in memory, I want to reduce that so that my memory can be freed up to service other queries. So hopefully that gets you started. Well, it's been about 20 minutes now, so surely the hot tub is filled up. I'm going to go out there with Eve and go enjoy a nice, pleasant hot tub out in this gorgeous, wintry Icelandic day. Hope you had fun and learned something, and I will see y'all on the next office hours. Adios.